Hi, welcome to Mission Control Houston. Joining us now here in the International Space Station Flight Control Room, the dock is in. Today we have NASA flight surgeon Steve Gilmore. Welcome, Steve, and thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great. Well, so we always hear about a lot of things that the astronauts are doing, medical experiments and all these kind of things, taking their own blood and this kind of stuff. We're going to get into some of that, but first I want to talk a little about you.
Okay.
So first tell me, how did you make your way here?
I had the opportunity when I was training and in medical school to do a rotation down at Cape Kennedy, or Kennedy Space Center, and had the opportunity to see a few launches and a couple landings, and thought it looked like a really interesting field to get into, and just pursued that interest through getting here. So I finished medical school and did a residency in emergency medicine, and then I went and did some specialized training down at the University of Texas in Galveston, and ultimately got hired here.
Very, very cool. And we're very, very happy to have you here. We know you do an awful lot to support the crew aboard, and I know they appreciate it as well as we do. Real quick, I want to just for you to just kind of explain what your role is as a flight surgeon, and when you get assigned a crew, kind of take us through what life is like once you're assigned a crew member.
Okay. Well, essentially, there's three phases of a mission, and so we typically get paired up with crews in the pre-flight phase, and the primary activities that we're doing there in the pre-flight phase is we will be involved in the medical exams that the crews do. They have exams that are similar to what a commercial pilot would have, and they have some additional specialized testing, and so we help walk them through those processes, and if there's any issues to work out, we'll work those out. And then our other primary responsibility in that time frame is to take that information that we get and take them to our medical boards, which certify crew members as medically cleared for flight. And then the other activities that we're doing in the pre-flight time frame are we're involved with the crew in terms of their selection of the type of experiments and stuff that they're participating in, and we have not just me, but there's a large group of folks in my division, and we put together a schedule to make sure that they can complete all the science and research activities that they're doing. And then as we get close to flight, we typically for the launches from Kazakhstan, we'll travel over to Star City and then to Kazakhstan with the crew and go into quarantine with them and go through the launch process and get them all to the point where they're all suited up and ready to go. And then after the launch, we come back and support the mission here in the control center.
Okay.
And support meetings and have a frequent conference with the crew and work out any issues that come up there.
Okay, so let's go back to Kazakhstan when you go in there before they launch. What is, let's say you go and stay in quarantine. What is that week leading up to launch like for you, and what kinds of tests and things that you are doing with the crew members?
It's a great question. So there's one of the primary things that we're there for in Kazakhstan is there's a quarantine process, and the rationale behind that is you want to start limiting access to the crew so that they don't pick up any type of illness that might impact their ability to launch into space. And so we participate in that. We help screen persons that are going to be meeting with the crew. And typically that's not we make folks aware of the importance of that, and that's not typically a terribly involved process. The other things that we're doing in that time frame is, crew are typically taking advantage of their last week or so on the ground and want to get out and enjoy the fresh air and some of the sights that you can see in Baikonur.
And so
yeah,
their little stick.
Yeah, and so we'll do things like some of the crews really like running. I can recall running 2 or 3 times a day with various crews in the week or so before launch. And then the other important thing we're doing is we sort of organize some of the crew's personal effects so that they have everything that they need when they go out to get suited up and are ready and prepared for the launch.
Sure.
And those are the primary things.
So you mentioned the running, and so I'm curious now. Is there ever any kind of Are there any sort of activities that you try to limit the crew to, or keep them saying no, we can't, restrict them from certain activities? I mean, obviously, I guess sky jumping is not an optimal something that they could do, but
Yeah, uh, thankfully, that I think those rules come from the crew office themselves. But
okay,
so we don't really get involved. I think they have some policies. They don't want them
sure,
doing something like downhill skiing or something too close to flight where they would have a risk of injuring
injury.
themselves. But as far as when we're down in Baikonur, they have access to a gym with some weights and
Mhm.
stuff like that, and then jogging. So the risks there are pretty minimal. So.
Right. And which, of course, as we know, fitness is essential to our health as well. And I'm sure you have some sort of involvement, I guess, not with the physical fitness itself, but overseeing their health, overall. And
Right.
as you said, even during their flight, how is it that you're maintaining that? Because I understand that these guys have their periodic health check. And I don't know, who was your last crew member?
The last crew I had the privilege of working with was Scott Kelly, and so
Okay.
that was 2 years ago or
Expedition
so.
26, yeah.
Yeah.
And so real quick, when he was in space, so we had these periodic health exams, and they're
Hmm.
just like what we kind of refer to as just going to the doctor for a regular checkup.
Right.
So is it the similar types of exam? I mean, the same kinds of things that we're looking at, and how is that data transferred to you so that you can review and see how the crew is actually doing?
So in terms of the periodic health test itself, that happens every month or two on board, and it's a fairly basic thing. We have the crew take a set of vital signs. They'll collect their weight, um, and then if they have anything going on, they'll talk to us about it. But most crews don't really have significant problems while they're in flight. So we do that just on a periodic basis, and then before big activities, like I know they just had a spacewalk, and we would have a medical conference with the crew, and we'd also do a assessment of their fitness level, their uh, aerobic capacity, so we can be sure that when they're going out on the spacewalk that they'll have the energy that they need to perform all the tasks that are
Right.
expected of them.
So in addition to the exams that you have, you also, I'm aware that you have the private medical conferences.
Yeah.
And so I guess that's just to talk one-on-one. I know Akaba had one yesterday.
Yeah.
And so I guess that's just a one-on-one to say, hey, how are you doing? Are there any issues or that sort of thing? And
Yeah. So we basically the medical conferences, they occur about every day for the first 5 days or so when crew get on board, and then after that they occur weekly, and we're just touching base with the crew on a personal level to see if they have any medical things that have come up. But more typically, we're talking about, is their exercise program working for them? What is the work pace up there? Do we need to kind of throttle back and let them get a little rest? Those type of issues.
okay.
So.
And so you mentioned collecting weight as one of the parts of that exam. And so I know that people are going to want to know about this. When you're in microgravity, how do you collect your weight? I mean, do you get to always say, yeah, I weigh 0?
That's a good question. Um, I, 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 I knew the physics of it once upon a time, but basically the crew are sitting on a device or positioned on a device that vibrates, and you can figure out their mass and thus their weight from that. And the reason that we're interested in that is just from a high level, if you keep your body weight or mass about or close to what it was when you left, it's a good predictor of how you're going to do post-flight. And we typically see that people that maintain their body weight close to what it was before they launched do very well when they get back.
And that's good insight from a medical standpoint, because I think I know that we want to be sure we can also fit back into our suits
Right.
and get back home as well. So that's all very good. So now I have another question, and this is going to be on the some of the things that they do. So they
Hmm.
check their own blood. I guess
Hmm.
they learn here. Are you involved in that process at all, or I mean, I understand the astronauts actually get trained to perform those kinds of things as well as the scans. So, are you involved in that process at all, or?
Yeah, it's a great question. We're sort of secondarily involved here. We've got a great team of trainers here, and so we've got some nurses here that help us train the crew about how to draw some blood from themselves, and so and also on other people, but they take them through a couple class process where they practice on mannequins and learn the techniques that you need to be successful with drawing blood. So, and it's something, it's a task that, or a skill that crew can pick up pretty quickly, and most of them do really well at it.
Sure. So essentially, I mean, not only are they up there doing science and maintenance and all these other things, but they're also somewhat of a medical officer up there as well. And so this brings me to a question that we have on Twitter. Actually, I have a couple of questions on Twitter. So we
Okay.
had polled Twitter and the public, and they do have questions as well.
Okay.
So the first one is actually talking about, and you can probably hear a little bit in my voice, fall is coming to the United States, and with it, allergies. This comes from Look Up More 7.
Mm-hmm.
Do you get a break from the allergies when you're on ISS?
Well, the short answer to that is yes. You're not exposed. The air up there, we do a lot of testing on, and it's very clean um, from the point of view of allergens. They have had some of the recent missions, they've noticed some accumulation of dust and other particles like that, and so some crew will experience some similar type symptoms to allergies, but from the point of view of is it the pollen in the air and that kind of stuff that you get on the ground, you really don't see that when they're on board.
Sure. So this brings me to the next question then.
Yeah.
If it's not allergies, the next question we have on Twitter comes from Josh Stern. What happens if an astronaut gets sick in space?
So there's a couple ways to answer that question. The first thing that folks should know is that in the pre-flight time period, for these three-man crews, we select two of the individuals on a three-man crew, and we take them through a process of medical skills training so that we know that everyone has a defined set of capabilities. And this would be things like taking vital signs, maybe giving a shot, talking about giving medications, and other activities like that. Mm-hmm. Then in conjunction with that, we've over time have built a set of procedures or a checklist that the crew get trained on, and so they have a stock set of procedures up there. If I'm having some nausea, or it's related to the medical type symptoms that you might expect them to see up there. So they have some instructions for how to use the equipment and the skills that we've trained them on the ground. And then the third part of that is if something were to come up, probably what we would expect to happen is based on the severity of it or their concern about it. Most things, common things happen commonly, and so they have up there something akin to like your medicine cabinet at home. It's got some vitamins, pain relievers, things like that, and so they can take care of a lot of the things that come up without talking to us. But if something were to come up that was more concerning to them, then we'd probably have a medical conference, one that wasn't scheduled versus the ones that we already talked about that happen on a weekly basis, and we'd just figure out from them what their concerns were, what was going on, maybe provide more direction and instruction and point them to one of the particular procedures about how to take care of it.
Sure. So I think that the real answer is define sick, because
Yeah.
it depends on what level of sick you are.
Right.
Now, what if they are terribly sick? What would happen?
Well, one of the things, the biggest thing that we do in that regard is it falls into the ounce of prevention's worth a pound of cure. And so we spend a lot of time, as you're probably familiar in talking with crew and stuff, there's a lot of time spent in terms of scrutinizing the crew medically. And that actually prohibits a number of people that apply from getting in, because basically what we want to try to do and spend our most effort on is identifying things that could potentially cause problems, because what we don't want to have happen is have events occur that results in having to bring crew members home early. And so for that reason, there's a number of things that if a person has in their medical history, it may prevent them from becoming an astronaut. And so that's really where most of the emphasis is placed. We do have some ability to take care of more severe medical conditions. And we do spend some time, as I talked about earlier, with the crew officers, teaching them how to do interventions for those types of situations. But really, where most of our effort is placed is in the prevention realm.
So we're talking about taking care of the crew as they're on station. Meanwhile, they do participate in some of these medical experiments, and one of which today looks at is the integrated cardiovascular. So it looks at the heart muscle atrophy.
Yep.
And so we know space does some things to our bodies, and I guess this is actually a part of trying to understand that as well. If you will, explain, because I think this morning Akaba took part of some ultrasound scans with Aki,
right.
Some assistance from Aki. So can you talk to me a little about that?
Yeah, so I've had some crew members participate in that experiment in the past, and it's a very interesting and thorough experiment. And basically what we're trying to get a better understanding of is, in the past, we've done experiments like this where you take snapshots of information, and what they're doing is they've put a whole complement of tests together to really get an understanding of what is happening to the cardiovascular system as a result of being in space. And so pre-flight, they do some very sophisticated imaging tests, some MRIs, so that they can measure accurately volumes and function of the heart. And then in flight, we have access to a fairly sophisticated ultrasound. And so what they're doing with those tests is to look at the heart in someone that's been in space for a while and try to understand, has the size of the heart changed? Has the volumes inside the chambers of the heart changed? Can we measure any differences as a result of being in this environment where your cardiovascular system doesn't have to work as hard as it normally does just on a day-to-day basis here on the ground? And then when they get back, they go through the similar set of imaging and function tests. So it's a very thorough and good investigation.
And I know one of the other things, well, I guess, sorry, you can maybe you can talk to me a little about what are the most common things, or the things that you try to prevent or may be a problem. I think I understand kidney stones is something that you definitely want to prevent before a crew member goes up in space. There's the issue with the vision, the eye, and I know they do eye exams pretty periodically. So can you talk to me a little about that?
Sure. I guess I'd sort of separate that into a couple things. First, there's just in terms of the process of when the crews first go into space, one of the reasons we have a medical conference for every day for the first several days is, in our experience, crews experience some problems, not problems, but there's an adaptation phase. And what we typically expect out of that is some crews will have some nausea, some occasional vomiting, as they're getting used to this new motion environment. And so we meet with them on a regular basis just to see how those types of things are progressing. And for the vast majority of the crew, it's not something that significantly impacts their ability to perform work and do those types of things. As you mentioned, you talked a little bit about, we've noticed as we've gotten better medical equipment on board, we've been tracking a few or this process in some crew where we notice that they have a little bit of change in how well they can see. And what I mean by that is they might have a change in a line or two. If I'm sure your viewers have been to the eye doctors, many of them, and they might not read quite as well. If you looked out at the eye chart, that may change by a line or two. And we've noticed this in the past, but now that we have better equipment up there, we're trying to take and get a case or get a series of individuals where we have really high quality images of the back of their eye and as well as other ways to test the vision to see if we can understand the process by which this is happening.
And sorry, that's really interesting.
Mhm.
That while we've been in space for all this time, there's still so many things that we don't know.
Right.
How the effects of space on our bodies, and especially when we're thinking about our future and going further, it's really important for us to understand these things.
Right.
So we talked about you being the doctor pre-flight and just before they launch, and traveling with them, and I guess staying pretty close with them throughout their until they launch. Um, Staying very much in contact with them while they're in space, so treating them while they're in space. And let's talk about landing, because Akaba is going to be landing soon with Padak and Revan, and in, gosh, almost a week on the 16th. And so explain to me, do you go back when they land, and what happens at that time? And I guess you want to check out the crew member when as soon as they.
So there's a couple things that there's obviously an integrated team that goes over to support that. The crew surgeons that are working with Dr. Akaba are doing a couple of things. Now they're doing a little refresher and review. We take a medical kit out with us to the landing sites, and they're just kind of reviewing the contents of that at this point in time. The crew on board will do a little bit of fitness testing again, another fitness test so we understand where their fitness level is, and can assure that they're prepared to re-enter. And so our docs will sort of take off from here over the weekend. So they usually go over about a week before the landing. And they have a meeting in Moscow that they support where there's folks from the program office and the crew office, and we talk about the plans and the contingency plans and how we're going to support the operation. And so we do that every time that there's a landing. And then after that meeting, we'll deploy. We'll go to Star City and deploy down to Kazakhstan with our colleagues from GCTC, and we have a good working relationship with the medical group over there. And they have a lot. They have a bit more training on the specifics of their vehicle. Their docs are very involved in terms of extracting the crew from the vehicle. And once the crew are gotten out of the vehicle, we're there doing medical checks and supporting the crew with whatever they might need. And after they do a brief...
Right, because actually, when they're landing in a, desert, like, desolate. And so I think, don't they erect some sort of medic tent to kind of give them some privacy and get out of their suits? And I guess that's where some of the testing takes place?
That's right. I may have skipped a step, but typically the way the operation works is once we get to Kazakhstan on the landing day, we all get in helicopters that are provided by our Russian colleagues, and we fly out to a very remote part of Kazakhstan, typically, and the capsule will land and they'll get the crew out, and then we'll go through about an hour or so of time in the tent with them, just getting them ready to get back in the helicopters and go back to the airport where ultimately they'll return home to the States or back to Moscow.
And then you somewhat oversee once they get back here, you still oversee some of their, I guess, their wellness when they get back.
That's correct. So on the airplane flight back, we call it the R+0 flight. So the crew about 4 hours after landing, the crew will get on a NASA plane in Kazakhstan, and we'll fly all the way back to Houston, and that's typically a roughly 20-hour flight. And on the course of that flight, typically the crew will be resting. We have a couple stops where we'll get out and just walk around, stretch our legs.
Where they can take their first shower.
They can take their first shower.
In months.
In months, yeah. And I'm always surprised that, the station is a very clean and sanitary place, but many of the crew have commented, you just don't miss it as much as you think you might, which
Right.
I find a little bit hard to believe.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
obviously they know. But on that plane flight, we'll be participating and helping them collect some preliminary medical tests
Okay.
and research tests. And then once they get back to Houston, the first 2 weeks is pretty busy, but we have in total, in terms of, from my perspective, we have roughly a 45-day, what we call a reconditioning period. And there's a great team that we are lucky to work with called the ACERs. And these are basically trainers with a lot of experience with working with astronauts when they return from space. And so the goal there is to get their strength and all their functioning back to their pre-flight baseline. And that 45 days with folks working hard. Typically, we get folks to where they were before they launch. So
Yeah.
it's a
Good
great
deal.
program.
Well, I understand a lot of them come back healthier and leaner and meaner than, when they launch. So obviously you guys are doing a great job, Dr. Gilmore. Thank you so much for coming out today.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
you having me.
This is Mission Control Houston.